And then this is a 1993 Bikie. It's the first year of production. It has a really unusual headset, and I've just been contacted by the company that makes them. If you have one of these and you need a headset, they have 75 of them that Bikie never purchased. Bikie hasn't used them since '95 or so, and they're willing to sell them for what they sold them for back then, which is quite a bit, considering it was only ever used on one bike. They never made very many of them. By the time they got popular, they switched from this headset. And also, this bike, the Bikie has a custom extrusion with a rail on the top the seat slides on. This one is just a piece of available rectangular tubing, and they bolt on the rail here. When their volume went up, they went and got an extrusion die made. The same thing that Linear did. The first Linear with above seat steering and the first one with below seat steering in the pictures, those are just a rectangular tube that you can buy anywhere. Is everybody bored? I'm trying to go faster, right? You're all bored by now, right? Okay, good.
This is great.
Okay, well, I can slow down. Believe me. I can really slow down. This is I'm guessing a '94. It's a Vision R40. It's a pretty early one. It has an earlier seat. The newer ones, all the seat covers are interchangeable. This one is before that. It's a below seat steering bike with direct steering. The fork, there's a tube on the fork here, and the handlebar attaches to that. And comes up here. And when you steer, this is how you do a U-turn on a Vision R40, okay? You initiate the turn to the left like this, and then you take your left hand off the handlebar because the handlebar just bars under the seat. It rode pretty good, but it did that. And the other thing about this bike, they sold it with above seat steering or below seat steering, and with long wheelbase or short wheelbase. So you could buy this frame, buy this bike, and add a couple of kit parts and make it a long wheelbase touring bike if you wanted to. Well, in the long wheelbase configuration, U-turns got really dramatic because the handlebar went under the seat for a long time. And the below seat steering short wheelbase was the most popular that they made. And when I bought my first Recumbent in '95, I called a couple of different companies to learn more about it. I ordered some catalogs and this and that. And I called Rand's. And Randy Schiller, the owner, answered the phone. That was back when Randy Schiller answered the phone. And I said, well, I'm trying to decide between buying a Vision R40 or a Rand's Rocket. And I'm kind of leaning toward the Vision because if I get it with above seat steering, I don't like it, I can switch to below seat steering. And he said something, he paused and he said, that's a very versatile design, but in order to make it that versatile, you have to make many compromises in each configuration, where the Rocket is optimized to be what it is. This one is not really good at anything, but it'll do it all. And I agree with him, having ridden them. We started to carry, we started a long time ago, in '95, we got Recumbents. My wrist hurt, I bought a Recumbent, blah, blah, blah. We started to grow, we got Vision. It was our first bike with below seat steering, and the Vision sold pretty well that year, but the next year, we got Linear and Husic also. And Visions stopped selling because people could test ride other bikes. And as soon as they could test ride something other than a Vision, almost nobody bought a Vision. Now, you said you weren't bored, right? You want a story? Okay, here's a story. I was in the shop one day, and it was 2002 in the winter, like February. And I had just purchased Linear, and I was excited about what we're going to do with Linear. It's going to be so much fun. And we're going to make it such a better bike, right? Because we know everything. Yeah, I've learned so much since then when I knew everything. I don't want to know how much never mind. So a lady called up, and she said, I want to come try a Vision with below seat steering. I said, oh, I've got one, come on down. So she came down, and she took it for a ride, and she came back, and I put her on a Linear with below seat steering. And she took that out for a ride, and I'm talking to her husband about, oh, I've got these plans, and I'm going to do all this and that, and it's going to be great, and Linear's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be so wonderful, great. And she came back and said, oh, I like the Linear better. And he patted me on the shoulder and said, you've got these great plans, and that's wonderful, but you own the company for 2 months now. We're going to buy the Vision because we want to be able to get parts in the future. All right, then. They were gone in 6 months. But the difference is that we don't have any debt. Vision expanded. They bought a wheel building, Winkle wheel they bought, and they expanded, and they had a bunch of debt. Their company assets were sold on eBay in 2004. Yeah, on eBay. They had a large storage unit, big enough to park, a couple RVs in or something, full of well-jig fixtures and all this stuff. And they just walked around and took picture, and it was described as being the home builder's dream or something. And we had a customer that called them up and said, what would it take to put Vision back in business? And they said, well, he said, would $1 million do it? And they said, well, maybe. He said, never mind. So, yeah, I don't know. But they also, the Vision was awfully inexpensive for what you got. It was a really good value. And enough of that. Anybody heard of the Counterpoint Presto before? It's a folding bike. The pedal boom folds here. And you can't see it, it's under the bag. The rear seat struts have a spring in them. And you can tell from the style of the spring that it's a prototype. So this is a very early Presto. Brian Ball had this bike and decided he wanted to pay his gas bill. So he was going to sell it. He called me up and said, you need to collect this bike. I said, okay. So I bought it. And now it hangs from the ceiling. Pretty neat bike. They say it's a little squirrely, but it sure scooted along, is the quote I've got about that one. It's made in Seattle. This is a 1995 Reynolds Weld Lab Nomad. I'm guessing it's a 95. George Reynolds, anybody hear of George Reynolds before? Yeah, he's an animal. I was in a race in Saint-Eustache, Canada, near Montreal, and there were 3 races. And I was racing one of George's bikes, and George was racing one of his bikes, and we were in the same category. We had some aerodynamics in the bike, which put us in the, I forget what HPRA category it was. Anyway, it was some category. There weren't that many of us in the category, but we were together. And there were 3 races. In the first race, it was top speed through a 200-meter trap. So you'd back up as far as you wanted to and sprint through a 200-meter trap. The hard part about that is, when do I sprint? A lot of people were accelerating as they left the gate or decelerating as they came into the gate. Timing your sprint was difficult. George beat me by 3 or 4 miles an hour. That's like, he handed me my button plate, right? The second race was, we're going around a stock car. It was like 1.5 mile circuitous loop, and we're going around it, and we started out, and George just went bam off the gun like that, and he lapped me. But I went off kind of gently. By the time he lapped me, I'd warmed up, and I kept him in sight for the rest of the race. But he lapped me, so I got 2 seconds. The third race was last man out, which means that it's an oval. And every time you go past the start-finish, normally what they do, every time you go past the start-finish, the last bike across the line out of the race. So it ends up with a sprint at the finish every lap. Well, this lap was like 1/8 of a mile. So the rule was it was every other lap. And the directions were given in French and translated, okay? So I thought that they said that when it got down to 3 bikes, then it would be just go. And the last man out, and it would, it would end the race. And George thought that too. By the time it got down to 3 bikes, I was watching from the sidelines, okay? George wasn't. There were 2 young guys, and George is probably 15, 20 years older than these 2 guys, And he's riding his own bike, which he built in his garage. I mean, George, he built it in his garage, and he set world records on them, okay? He's an amazing guy, a real animal. Do not arm wrestle George Reynolds. So the third race, I'm out, and George is still in, and they get down to 3 bikes left, and George thinks that means go. So George takes off, and there's all this shouting in French, and George was disqualified. Well, it turns out that 2 seconds and whoops, I got a first, is more points than 2 firsts, and it did not qualify. So I beat George Reynolds. Yeah, like hell, I beat George Reynolds. He handed me my button plate every time. But officially, you see how that works. He was famous for racing short wheelbase bikes. Notice this bike has got a lot of tiller too. If you draw a line straight up here and measure the distance back to the handlebar, holy cow! To do a U-turn on this bike, you'd start like this, and then you put your hand over here, and you go like that. I was in a parade with a bike with a lot of tail. It wasn't a Reynolds bike. It was a Maxim made in Ohio. They went under, as Recumbents started to take off, they went out of business, so that's not a real good recommendation. But I was in this parade, and I was riding, in a parade you do figure eights, right? That's what you do. So I'm doing figure eights like this. And like that, And I'm riding around one time with the handlebar out like that, and it occurs to me there's a lady standing there with her purse. And she's leaning forward, but I think I can hook that with my brake lever. I can get that purse. I decided not to. But I could have got it right off her shoulder there, I would bring it back on the next lap. Who made the first full suspension Recumbent? Bill Husic, apparently. He made 7 of them. The yellow part is a steel frame. The blue parts are all aluminum. He even disassembled the front derailleur to anodize it. Okay, that's nice. Okay, here's a question. Who made aluminum grip shifters? Never seen it. There they are. They're blue. They're aluminum. Whatever. He made very, very few of those and then stopped and went back to making the Husic Leprechaun and Horizon. Has anybody ever heard of this little company? Yep. Yeah, okay. I thought maybe. This is the 146th bike made. It was made in a Michigan garage. Quote, before we could afford a tube bender. Okay, our tube bender cost us like $450, okay? And that was in 2003. So, yeah, tube benders aren't all that expensive. They made them in their garage. They grew themselves quite a company, didn't they? Okay, now the next one, so far those have all been in our collection. The next one just came in for repair and is waiting by the front door for me to get back. It's an odd duck, okay? I include it because it's such an odd duck. All right, let me tell you what's going on here. You pull on these 2 levers and it's rowing action. Okay? Okay. And you can have the seat sliding if you want to, so you can push on the pedals and slide the seat back and get your legs in the deal. Or you can put a pin in and lock the seat and just row with your arms. Yeah, good luck with that. Now, in case that wasn't innovative enough, the steering, this whole rail that the seat is attached to, is pivoted so that you can lean the seat this way to turn left and lean it this way to turn right. So, people talk about the mythical future lean steer trike. No, it's history. It works. I'm not saying it's real well executed, but it's aluminum frame and the serial number is 1470. So who makes it? It was made in Fresno, California by Rocycle. I don't know. There's not much information online about it, but I've got one. Not mine. It's in the collection. So, and I'm done. Are there any weird questions? Because I'm good at answering those. Weird questions.
Hey everybody, let's thank Peter one more